of us should wait. And if you're interested in donating blood nationally, there is a toll-free number to call to get information. That number is 1-888-US-BLOOD. Dan.
Aaron, one thing that comes through in that report, and it's worth noting, New Yorkers, around this country, and for that matter around the world, have this reputation of being sort of chaotic all the time. But you and I know, as longtime residents of this city, that when the heat's on, when the pressure's on, New Yorkers are frequently at their best. And that was the case today, I think. That New Yorkers are, it's true, they're hard to herd, but they're impossible to stampede. And they didn't today. When the call went out for that blood, calmly people went to the blood centers. Aaron Moriarty, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Government and industry officials said at least one flight attendant and 2 passengers called from 3 of the planes as they were being forced down in New York and Washington today, each describing similar circumstances, and a picture is beginning to form. Bloodbath aboard some of those planes, with hijackers with knives attacking flight attendants. The callers indicated the hijackers armed with knives in some cases were stabbing flight attendants. And a businessman, his wife and young child aboard a United flight that left Boston and crashed into the World Trade Center. Twice this businessman called his father in Connecticut as his plane was being hijacked. This is according to law enforcement officials. Now, the law enforcement officials said the victim aboard the plane's father told the FBI his son made 2 calls. Both times the phone was cut off. In the first call, the businessman said a stewardess had been stabbed. In the second call, the son said his plane was going down. Now, there was another report on another aircraft that a flight attendant aboard the second jetliner that struck the World Trade Center managed to call an emergency number from the back of the plane, and an American Airlines source said that the flight attendant reported her fellow flight attendants had been stabbed. This is information we didn't have earlier, and pictures begin to form of what the terror was in the skies. 2 of the flights involved in today's attacks began in Boston. Wyatt Andrews has more on how that city has been struck by this tragedy. Wyatt?
No, but I think we lose. Kenny Hot Roll, yeah, I wouldn't do that tonight.
At Boston's Logan Airport, where 2 of the hijacked planes originated, scores of relatives of the victims were met by airline officials for consolation and were then taken to a nearby hotel to await information. American Airlines lost its Los Angeles-bound Flight 11, and the airline confirmed the identity of its lost pilot, Captain John Oganowski, who was 52 and a 22-year veteran of the airline. Outside his home in Drake, Massachusetts, the captain's extended family gathered, including his wife and 3 daughters. Oganowski's brother Jim described him as a hero, a man who joined the Air Force out of patriotism during the Vietnam War and who viewed his work as an airline pilot his life's dream.
Our family is obviously grieving, as is the whole nation, for what has happened today. I personally think I'm in shock. I'm in some type of denial.
Official information about how the flights were seized and how Logan's security might have been breached is still under investigation and is closely held. Airport officials stress that security inside Logan's terminals, as elsewhere across America, is the responsibility of the separate airlines, and that the airport itself was secure.
We've closed the airport to all arriving and all departing flights. We've increased our security measures. We've shut down all the construction sites within Logan Airport, both airside and landside.
At the Oganowski home, official information is also apparently scarce. The pilot's brother Jim told reporters that the family had no information about what Captain Oganowski went through or whether there were any communications between the pilot and FAA controllers. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Drake, Massachusetts.
President Bush was in Florida when the attacks occurred. Florida has as its governor the president's brother, and Jeb Bush, the governor, is up for re-election. However, the president's trip to Florida today had to do with some school visitations and emphasizing his plans for education. But he quickly broke off that as soon as he learned about the attacks on the World Trade Center and said he was flying back to Washington. It didn't turn out that way, at least not directly and immediately. John Roberts has more on the President's Day and his response tonight. John?
Dan, we'll take you through more of the President's Day in just a moment, but for the moment, the President denounced tonight in the strongest terms what he called evil, despicable acts of terror, and he promised that those responsible would be identified and brought to justice. But there was no talk of retaliation tonight, nor even possible leads as to who might be responsible. It is far too early for that, White House aides said.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
From the Oval Office tonight, in the most important moment of his 9-month-old presidency, George Bush offered a grieving nation words of resolve and reassurance.
Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America.
The enormity of the tragedy yet to be fully realized, the president sought to soothe the raw pain of what may be thousands of victims' families. And he sent a clear message to those responsible for these heinous crimes.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
The president was in Florida when word of the attacks first broke. Reading with a group of elementary students, Mr. Bush was stopped cold when his chief of staff delivered the news.
Move everybody across the street.
Moments later, in Washington, an urgent call to evacuate the White House.
I'm told that a plane went into the Pentagon and they're chasing us off the grounds here.
It was an extraordinary scene as staff and the press corps were rushed from the grounds. If the Pentagon had been targeted, the Secret Service feared the president's home could be next.
Get everybody back. Everybody back.
Fire trucks took up positions on Pennsylvania Avenue, while SWAT teams stood vigil from the roof. Police sealed off a 2-block area around the White House. The only ones left inside the mansion, the vice president and his national security team, coordinating a response to the crisis from the Situation Room. With a continuing threat in Washington, the Secret Service would not allow the president to return and had him fly immediately to the security of Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward.
Shaken and solemn, Mr. Bush addressed the nation and vowed these acts of terrorism will not stand.
Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
From Barksdale, the president headed for Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, home of the Strategic Air Command, where he conferred with his national security staff about how to proceed. Confident that the White House had been secured, he then headed back for Washington, determined to send a signal to the world that America would stand strong in the face of these horrible acts. The main message of tonight's address by the president: America will recover. The government will be open for business tomorrow. America's economy will be open for business tomorrow, he said. America has stood down enemies before, the president addressed the nation tonight, and it will do so again. But he added, no one will ever forget this day. And it is safe to say that in Washington and across the country tonight, there is no question. Everything has changed. Dan?
Live from, again, now on the grounds of the White House, our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts. I want to take you now again live, transport you by television to the lower end of the tip of Manhattan. Darkness descended 2.5 hours ago. In many ways, it's black as a crow's wing down there now, except for the fires that are still burning. There have been losses among New York City's firefighters and police in the rubble, the disaster that is this part of New York. But now on into the night, their fellow firefighters and policemen are down. 1, trying to put out the fires that remain. 2, trying to look through the rubble for survivors. There are people trapped in the rubble. We reported to you a short while ago an actual case of a man who called on his cell phone to his family out of state saying, this is where I am, send somebody to get me. Combing the rubble for possible survivors, also combing the rubble for additional bodies. Much of the chaos of earlier in the day has disappeared, but the enormity of what has happened is sinking deeper and deeper into the consciousness of this city and this nation tonight. With me back at our CBS News World headquarters here in New York, Judith Miller, the New York Times and one of the world's ranking authorities on the Middle East, and for that matter on Osama bin Laden. Especially among journalists who speak English, Ms. Miller may be the authority. But thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Dan.
First of all, Osama bin Laden. Many Americans have no idea who he is and what he represents. Put a frame around Osama bin Laden for us.
Well, Dan, I think you've seen the pictures of him, this tall Saudi with a beard, wielding a Kalashnikov, moving furtively around Afghanistan, which harbors him. I think he is the leader now, the mastermind, the financier of a network that we don't look at very much. It's called Al-Qaeda, and it means the base. And it's the base from which Osama bin Laden hopes to launch his worldwide jihad against America.
How did this man get to this position? Acquaintances of mine in Afghanistan, people who were involved in repelling the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, several of them described bin Laden to me in these terms. He was a Toyota warrior. He was a rich, spoiled Saudi who came there, ran around a Toyota pickup truck, supplied a lot of money, and they appreciated that. But he was hardly a frontline warrior firing at the Soviets point-blank range or going hand-to-hand with him. How did he suddenly get to be this icon?
Well, I think he became enamored of his own reputation, and he understood after the Soviet Union was expelled from Afghanistan that ordinary Muslims, if they were armed and well-trained, could accomplish wonders. They could even defeat the United States if he helped train them. And so after the Soviet Union left Afghanistan, he made that his life's mission, to set up camps in Afghanistan, in the Sudan, wherever he could find a host, to train young Muslim militants from all over the world who would be willing to give themselves, their lives up for Allah to accomplish this goal. It was a distortion of Islam as we know it, but it had great appeal to young people who were disaffected from 50 countries. He's had more than 5,000 young militants from 50 countries move through his network of camps, the dozen camps that he personally finances and controls through his agents.
Let's talk about state-sponsored terrorism. Real or imagined here in the first edges of the 21st century, and how, if at all, does it fit in with Osama bin Laden?
Well, I think we used to think that only a state could do something like what we saw today.
Judith Miller, excuse me for a moment. I know you'll forgive this. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani is speaking live here in New York. We're going to pick that up at the moment.
2730. That's 1-212-560-2730. If you have questions throughout the night and tomorrow, that's the number to call rather than 911, which you should just call if there is an emergency. We had over 1,100 emergency room visits today that we know of. So far, we have 6 fatalities that we know of, 5 at St. Vincent's. Obviously and tragically, there are going to be a lot more than that, but that's what we know of at this point. We had over 300 patients that were treated at St. Vincent's, over 160 at Bellevue, 250 at Beekman Downtown Hospital. And the hospital, these hospitals were probably the ones under the most stress, but they were able to get through. I want to thank all the people that helped St. Vincent's getting the water that they needed and the support that they needed. Also, I'd like to say to people that might consider doing this that services should be made available in New York City tomorrow on a fair and equitable basis. Anybody that thinks that they're going to gouge consumers or ask for extra amounts of money for food or anything else, we're going to have the police and the Consumer Affairs Department out there. So just be careful. This is a time in which we all have to cooperate and help each other. Alternate side street parking is suspended. Sanitation services will take place in most of the city, except obviously in the lower part of Manhattan, where the sanitation department will be working to remove debris, which has already started. And the schools, again, will be closed tomorrow. And hopefully we'll get them open as soon as possible. Tomorrow the effort will be at trying to recover as many people as possible and trying to clean up the horrible mess that was created by all of this. And I would ask people to cooperate as much as possible in that effort. If you have to come into Manhattan because your business is essential, then obviously do it. The upper part of Manhattan will be open. But if tomorrow is a day in which you want to stay home and stay with your family and give comfort and support maybe to other people that have been affected by this. It would be a good day to do that. Yeah, the point that Richie Shearer makes is people are wonderful, and I mean this in the best sense of the word. We've had thousands and thousands of people that have come to help us. When I was down at the site near the World Trade Center, I met a lot of the National Guard's people that the governor has sent, really wonderful young men and women. We have enough volunteers now. We have more volunteers, frankly, than we need at this point. And what we need to do is to focus the efforts of the professionals that are there in being able to do the recovery and try to save as many lives as we can and restore services as quickly as possible. We may be asking for more volunteers tomorrow and the next day and the day after, but right now we don't need any more volunteers.
Mr. Mayor, is there still hope that there are people who are
Yes.
still alive and well?
Yes, there's hope. There's hope that there are people that are still still alive.
How is the rescue effort hampered by the darkness? What do you do?
We moved a lot of lights in so that the area is being lit now, so that I don't think the rescue effort is going to be hampered by the darkness. The rescue effort is hampered by the fact that there's still fire there. There are still unsound structures, and it's still dangerous, although the rescue effort is now taking place. But if you're asking me, is it hampered? It's hampered because of the conditions, not because of...
You are watching continuing CBS News coverage.
This is a 9 Eyewitness News special report.
Washington, D.C. remains under a state of emergency through the night as President Bush vows that those responsible for today's terrorist attacks will be brought to justice. Good evening. I'm Gurveer Dinza.
I'm Gordon Peterson. We will come back to CBS News coverage in just a minute. But first, the latest on the terrorist attacks here from Washington. The Pentagon continues to burn tonight after the worst terrorist attack in American history.
We want to go now to Dave Statter, who is standing by there with the latest on casualties. Dave?
We have some very disturbing news for you. We're talking here with Chief Ed Plugger of the Arlington Fire Department as they continue to fight the fire here. You've been down there in command most of the day. What can you tell us about casualties? How many bodies are in there?
Obviously, we're still trying to determine exactly how many casualties we are, how many bodies we have. We know that it's going to be quite extensive.
Can you give me numbers?
We're talking in the several hundreds.
You gave a high figure earlier?
Yeah, I talked earlier about the maximum around 800, but yet we still have a long way to go, and you know, it's kind of difficult at this particular stage to say exactly.
Okay, there you hear it from Arlington Fire Chief Ed Plugger. As minimum of 100 bodies, maybe 800 in the Pentagon. Now we go to Chief Ramsey's press conference in the district.
Will be in effect beginning tomorrow morning. We do expect to have some traffic, however, now that both the district and federal government have implemented a liberal leave policy and schools are closed, the traffic will be a lot lighter, which is good for us because there'll still be a lot of movement of equipment, especially over in the area of the Pentagon and so forth. And that's pretty much what we are right now.
Chief, your officers responded to a number of suspicious packages, suspicious vehicles, gone into some of the downtown parking garages. Did they find anything that turned out to be a real bomb or anything that was dangerous?
I'm not aware of anything that has turned out to be anything that would have been an explosive device. Again, it's not unusual when something like this happens. There's a heightened sense of awareness. People do call us. We encourage people to call us if they see anything suspicious. But as of now, I'm not aware of anything that's turned out to be anything.
Are you comfortable that the city is going to be as safe tomorrow as it was yesterday?
I don't think anything will be the same as it was yesterday, quite frankly, and I don't think anybody can give those kinds of assurances. All we can do is just do the best we can to maintain a level of safety and security, but right now, quite frankly, I don't think anybody has a full handle on what's taking place. But there will never be another day like today. Nothing from this point on will ever be the same.
What are people going to encounter if they do decide to not come back into downtown tomorrow?
There could be some traffic delays. We're going to do everything we can to get information out. If there's any area of the city that we feel it necessary to block traffic, we're going to try to get that information out. But people need to understand that there may be a possibility that they come in and have to detour a particular area. They need to just be patient and just follow the instructions of any police officer or other public safety official they may encounter.
Will Constitution Avenue remain closed as far as you know?
Right now, we don't have any information. We're trying to get information to relay to the public about whether or not that area of the city is going to be closed tomorrow or whether or not it will be open. That's a decision that is yet to be made.
So for people who work at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or any of those buildings within a 2-block radius of the White House, you don't know?
We do not know. They should check all the media outlets, because what we plan to do is take advantage of the media in a sense of getting information out very quickly to the public, both through TV and through radio, of any street closures or anything unusual, so that we can let the people know and avoid any kind of traffic congestion or inconvenience.
What about the IMF protesters and the World Bank meeting?
We are recommending that the meetings between IMF and World Bank be canceled.
And why?
Security concerns. That is not our final decision to make. However, that will be our recommendation.
Are you going to be paying a special attention to any facilities like reservoirs, power facilities, that sort of thing?
Obviously, we're concerned about a lot of areas in the city. That's one reason why we've called back so many people, and we do have special attentions at numerous locations throughout the District of Columbia, both the kind of facilities you're talking about, you know, power and water and things like that, but also embassies and other buildings.
What about go back to the IMF and World Bank issue? You touched on it briefly. Have you had a dialogue with anyone at the IMF and World Bank? And if so,
no.
If not, what will you say to them? What is that decision you made?
Again, I understand all the consequences around that. I'm just simply saying that there's going to be a lot of people rethinking a lot of things right now. But I think the focus at this moment ought to be just on the victims and their families of what took place today, and let's take each day as it comes along. But I think that business as usual is something that we can just get into our minds that there's no such thing anymore. Things have changed, and changed dramatically as of today.
Sir, there was some radio traffic and about, it sounded like an officer who might have been at the Pentagon. Is there somebody in the police family that might have been over there, was in the hospital or anything?
I don't know the answer to that specifically.
As far as these buildings down here, this area, appears to be all locked down. Will the court be open tomorrow? Will this be open tomorrow for DMV? And also, what about Judiciary Square?
We're in contact with the courts. Certainly the arraignment court will be open. I'm going to speak to the Chief Judge again tonight. I believe that it's likely that the court system will be open. The DMV here at 301 C Street, which is in the basement of MPD headquarters, will be closed tomorrow. We're obviously going to keep this building as the command post, so DMV will not be available. That is the only government service that we are saying needs to be closed.
What?
Judiciary Square will be open tomorrow. The rest of the government agencies will be open, and as I said, we need to confirm with the Chief Judge of Superior Court about their plans.
Why close the schools?
We talked a lot about this. The primary reason was that we want to be able to devote our law enforcement and other response personnel to any other issues that may come up during the day. That frees up, you know, the concerns there at the school. Having all those children in school frees up some of the traffic concerns that we have. And while we have the government in a liberal leave status, we think this will be more manageable for people.
So again, you're urging people to come back downtown tomorrow and come to work.
The government will be open. People are free to take liberal leave if that's what they need to do, but the government will be open tomorrow, both federal and local.
I see Chief Pugh is here. Chief Pugh, can you answer a couple of questions, please? How is your fire department prepared right now?
Well, we've actually increased our staffing in EMS as well as our firefighters. Today, I think they performed very well, and although we sent 13 engine companies and 6 truck companies over to Arlington, we had enough staffing here because we put our contingency plan in place very early, and so we have the resources in place now.
Are all of your guys okay?
All of our people are fine. We had some of them been overcome by a little bit of smoke at the scene, but they're doing fine. They're doing fine.
Would you be prepared to deal with this kind of fire in the district?
Absolutely. Nobody can, feel like they are adequately prepared for anything, but I can assure you that Our firefighters are very professional in what they do, and they did a very good job today. I would say I like my condolences to go out to the New York Fire Department because I think they lost a number of firefighters today. But we performed very well today. I'm very pleased.
Chief, did you receive any intelligence? I mean, the word from the Fed seems to be that there was no kind of prior warning. Is that what you had in your department?
Nobody in the Metropolitan Police Department was aware of anything prior to it taking place.
Chief, can you respond to this, or maybe Margaret, as far as the National Guard is concerned? We did notice about 10 military police Humvees going down K Street. I noticed some of them are out in the intersections now. How is the National Guard's role being played out here, and where are they now, and what are they doing?
The National Guard was activated today to provide whatever sort of operational support was necessary. They were available for traffic management, crowd control, any of those kind of issues. They remain in standby status, and they're at the disposal of Chief Ramsey and the Metropolitan Police Department if they're needed any further.
Are they deputized to act as police officers?
They are acting in their capacity as the National Guard.
Armed, I think?
They are. Another point that we'd just like to make, we really encourage people to get out and give blood. There's an enormous shortage in the blood supply. We really encourage people tomorrow, if you are not coming into the office, please go out and give blood. This is a time we all need to come together as a community here and support our friends and neighbors in Northern Virginia and in New York. Thank you.
You've been listening to a news conference where Chief Charles Ramsey and Chief Ronnie Few from the fire department have been talking about what happened today. Chief Ramsey saying that they did not receive any intelligence prior to what happened today about what was going to happen. But he said, he was asked, what about tomorrow? And he said, nothing will ever be the same again.
Well, and earlier today we heard from the Pentagon, a firefighter over there saying there may be as few as 100, maybe as many as 800 fatalities over there at the Pentagon.
Well, many of those people who were injured at the Pentagon were taken over to Virginia Hospital Center in Arlington, and Jennifer Ryan's there now with the latest on that. Jennifer?
Gervier, a very disturbing scene just a few minutes ago unfolded. There was a family who came here tonight. They said they've checked all the lists in the area, and they did not find the name of their loved one on the list here either. Of course, this is the hospital that's had the most people. Sharon Carver, a 34-year-old woman who worked at the Pentagon from Waldorf, is missing tonight. This is what her brother had to say to us just a few moments ago.
We've called all the hospitals in the area. Nobody seems to have her yet or knows where she is. And I mean, it's not like her not to call. I mean, she would go to a paid telephone or something. We know that they did find her immediate supervisor, and he's heavily sedated over at Washington Hospital Center.
That's Arthur Carver of Manassas. He and his family asking people for their prayers and for any information tonight. He said that they have asked the hospitals for lists. That's all they can really provide. They've also called the Pentagon. There's no word there yet. But as Dave Statter just reported, we may be dealing with an enormous amount of casualties. The number that we just heard, possibly 800. You'll hear more tonight from Arthur Carver and about his sister and this hospital and everything that everybody is dealing with from this scene just 5 miles from the Pentagon tonight at 11 o'clock.
Jennifer Ryan, thank you very much. The Pentagon, the building, is continuing to burn tonight. Dave Statter has the latest in this report. Dave?
We're continuing with Chief Ed Plogger from the Arlington Fire Department, who's been out there in command through much of the day. When we left talking to you, we were talking about, you say, the body count in the hundreds, the high Pentagon figure at, what was it again?
Yeah, between 850 and 900. So, I mean...
Yeah, and this includes people on the plane?
Includes people on the plane, right.
When will they be able to make recoveries of these bodies?
We'll start first thing tomorrow morning at daybreak. We're going to do some preliminary peeling of the building this evening, and then, of course, we'll start full force tomorrow morning.
You're saying these fires will burn through the night?
We'll be in a defensive mode all night, which means that we'll be using our lines to throw water from a distance. We're deeply concerned about firefighter safety, the slate roofs, very, very complex operation, and nighttime makes it extremely difficult and hazardous.
There have been fires in the Pentagon before, and we've always heard it's a maze in there, that this fire travels, as we've seen it travel, a great distance here. Describe it from your perspective, what the problem is in getting this fire out.
Well, as you might imagine, because the fire was aided by a tremendous amount of flammable liquids, the jet fuel, as well as the contents of the Pentagon, we were, and I won't say fortunate because that's a horrible thing to say during this situation, but this is the section of the Pentagon that was sprinklered, and so the sprinkler system was operating at impact, so that there was some aid there from the building itself. Again, it's just an extremely difficult, massive fire operation to undertake.
In that hole we see, which collapsed about 39 minutes, I estimated, after the initial impact, part of the jet that is disintegrated?
Yes, it is.
The fuselage?
The fuselage is gone, right.
And it was in that hole there?
It's in that hole there, right.
In that hole there. And that's where a lot of the search and rescue teams will be working tomorrow, you think?
That's absolutely. They'll be working there, as well as on the two wings around the sides where the building is pancaked down.
You were there, very busy today. Your thoughts?
Yeah, as you might imagine, this is the tragedy that we all thought about a long time in our recent efforts on terrorism. And to be honest with you, we always were afraid of the Pentagon as being a target, but never in our wildest dream to this extent. And so there was just, you know, I'm still in disbelief, total disbelief.
Thank you, Chief Ed Plugger. Any questions for him back there at Broadcast House?
Dave, I tell you, the numbers are just staggering, and, you know, all of us have been at work all day today, and it's just starting to sink in, the magnitude of what happened. We're now beginning to learn the names of some of the people that were on the planes that crashed today.
Well, one of the aircraft, that was the American Airlines Flight 11, that Boeing 767 en route from Boston to L.A. That's one of the ones who went into the World Trade Center. Among the people on the passenger list are David and Lynn Angel. They have a home in Chatham, Massachusetts on Cape Cod. David Angel is the executive producer of NBC's Frasier, as well as a number of other programs.
And then, of course, we mentioned this earlier today, but Barbara Olson, who is the wife of Ted Olson, Solicitor General of the United States, was one of the passengers on American Airlines Flight 77. That was the plane that left Dulles International. It was supposed to be going to Los Angeles, but instead ended up crashing there at the Pentagon.
She actually called her husband on her cell phone from the aircraft twice and said, "We are being hijacked."
And she actually talked about, she said there were knife-wielding hijackers,
right.
And again, that's now beginning to come out, that these hijackers were in fact carrying knives. Karen A. Kincaid, a lawyer with Wiley, Ryan, and Fielding here in Washington, D.C., also on that plane. And also, our Stacey Cohen talked with a family in Prince George's County. They're members at First Baptist Church of Highland Park. The father of that family was on that plane as well.
Well, we're going to be hearing names. There'll be a very long list for several days as these names become available to us. We're going to continue to scroll the latest on closings in the bottom of the screen throughout the night. We'll have the latest in a special 9 Eyewitness News report at 11.
We'll see you then.
1,500 people in the South Tower. 25 floors of offices in the World Trade Center complex. I'm not saying that Morgan Stanley per se is going to get any of this federal help, but it's an indication of why the president has declared New York City a federal disaster area, to say nothing of the loss of life and the wounded. Exact totals on those killed and wounded, we frankly have no idea. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani has been straightforward throughout the day and evening saying we simply don't know. It may be a long time before we know. David Martin reported a short while ago that a firefighting authority who'd been in the Pentagon for most of the day, the Pentagon struck by one of those hijacked airliners, said that he believed that there were 100 to 800 bodies in the Pentagon that have yet to be recovered. That was his opinion. Chaos reigned throughout New York City for at least part of this morning. People got steady and calmed after the initial shock of what was happening. As Troy Roberts reports, no one who lives or works in this city was untouched by it.
It started with a plane crash.
It's like, oh my God, it did. A plane crashed into the World Trade Center.
Literally out of the blue.
Clear as day, AA on the wing, just going, I'm like, what the heck is that? Is it filming a movie here or something? Then all of a sudden, bam.
Brothers Jeff and Scott Such were there, ground zero, with their video camera.
You're good right here in the corner. Stay in the corner.
So after the first strike, you're not thinking terrorist attack, are you?
You're thinking this is a really huge accident that I should be seeing this, so we just decided to go even closer.
The brothers continued shooting this videotape. As people trapped in the building began falling from the windows.
It almost looked as if someone had just like stepped backwards and had fallen through a window.
What's this other jet doing?
But the terrorists weren't done. 20 minutes later, another plane, another tower, another devastating attack.
Boom, just a loud explosion, and then you just look up to the sky because that's where it came from. The noise came from above. You look up and it's just like confetti in the sky.
And that was just the beginning. On the ground, chaos as one of the famed Twin Towers crumbles. Firefighters and rescue workers attack the other tower, still standing, still burning. Who knows how many trapped inside.
So start going to your trucks, make sure you got flashlights. If you don't have any lights, let me know.
Oh, no!
Then that tower collapses too.
And we had some time to get some of the people out, but then there was those secondary explosions and then the subsequent collapses. So I don't know how many people were in there. I know there was a lot of firefighters, a lot of public safety personnel were in there.
You call her and you tell her, let her hear your voice. She's going to need to hear your voice. Just like you need to hear my voice, I'm okay. I'm okay. Thank you. Bye. See you later. I love you.
All day long, more fallout.
Because it might be a bomb in the school, maybe.
A reported bomb threat. A dangerous gas leak.
This is Ed Sullivan. I want that building evacuated.
All civilians, please head north of Moore Street.
Then, a nearby building collapses from the day's damage.
You are watching Building 7 at the World Trade Center collapse.
Amid the destruction and devastation, though, one remarkable thing did happen. Today's tragedy brought out the best in a city not always known for its kindness and humanity. 3 hours after the attack, area residents have put out an open call for volunteers to search the rubble for any signs of possible survivors.
They're here to volunteer. They're a laborer, they're a plumber, they're an electrician, whatever they are, it's to stay with you guys. If they're medical, they go across the street.
We're CPR and first aid trained. You're prepared to go into that rubble? Yeah, unfortunately we are. You know, whatever we can do to help out. I know there's not enough people in the city of New York to do it. I mean, it's a mess over there.
These volunteers say there is just one thing they want, something uniquely New York. Street justice, tough and immediate.
I hope they're sending planes over there right now. Take care of business.
The world was caught unprepared for what happened today, especially in New York City and especially among those coordinating rescue efforts. 60 Minutes' Leslie Stahl has that story. Leslie?
Dan, ever since the Cold War, the federal government has had an elaborate plan to keep the government running if the Soviets ever attacked Washington. Over a year ago, I spoke with then President Clinton's counterterrorism czar, Dick Clark, who has the same job today under President Bush. He told us that when the Cold War ended, they decided to hold on to that plan to keep the government running.
We thought that individual buildings in Washington, and indeed perhaps all of Washington, could still come under attack. Only it might not be from the former Soviet Union, it might not be with a missile flying over the poles, it might be with a terrorist walking a weapon into our city. And the city could still be attacked and put out of action. And therefore we have developed a new program so that the federal government's emergency capabilities will continue to operate even if Washington doesn't.
So tell us what kind of operation you have up and running, or at least ready to be operational.
As soon as Washington goes down, the Pentagon, the Justice Department, the FBI, the Coast Guard, all of the key agencies of the U.S. government devolve power to other centers, some secret locations, some urban centers elsewhere, but we have a plan, we have trained people, we exercise it regularly, that if Washington isn't around, the U.S. government continues.
So is there a shadow Treasury Department somewhere right now?
For every one of our major departments, there's a shadow department somewhere right now.
There's a shadow Oval Office?
There are facilities where the president could operate, where a future president could operate, and for each of our key departments. Again, the message...
Is it like a bunker, or is it a... Can you give us any information?
It's an elaborate system, and it involves both old-fashioned bunkers and new-fashioned methods. Let's just say that. It's survivable. That's the key point.
Well, it seems that parts of this plan was activated, or at least contemplated today, when President Bush was flown from Louisiana to Nebraska, but then deactivated when it was determined not only that it was safe for him to return to Washington, but that it was important that it not look as though our government was crippled and on the run. Now, there has also been an elaborate plan here in New York City to react to something like what happened today, a terrorist attack with mass casualties. And as we came upon elements of that as we drove around the city. This is the scene we came upon 20 blocks north of the Trade Center. Row upon row of ambulances from all around New York and its suburbs. Had you gone through a training program for just this kind of an incident?
Maybe not this catastrophic, but it's definitely trained.
The ambulances were lined up in front of a huge commercial complex that was being transformed into an emergency triage center.
This is a coordinated plan in conjunction with the Fire Department and New York City EMS. The plan calls for that when we have volunteers, at this time we have over 300 attending surgeons, 300 residents, nurses, paramedics, physician assistants, and nurse practitioners, all inside, broken up into teams.
How many patients will you be able to operate on in here?
We have, I think, 50 operating suites and enough to handle about 400 patients that we set up at this time.
More and more medical personnel arrive throughout the day.